All right, let's dive in. Today we're headed straight into Chinese culture, exploring superstitions. But not just any superstitions. We're talking about umbrellas.
Umbrellas.
Yeah, you heard that right. Umbrellas. We've got some excerpts from a personal reflection. Let me tell you, it really makes you think about those everyday objects differently.
I can imagine. It's amazing how something so ordinary, like an umbrella, can become, well, so culturally significant. It's like they're practical, but they also hold all this symbolism.
Exactly. And speaking of symbolism, the source tells this story about a wedding ritual involving an umbrella. And the consequences are, let's just say, pretty intense. Makes you wonder, right?
Oh, yeah, those wedding rituals talk about tradition and expectations.
Okay, so before we get to that story, I think we need some background. In Chinese culture, obviously umbrellas are practical, right? Especially with the sun and those sudden downpours. But our source really emphasizes that there's a much deeper meaning here.
Absolutely. It's like, in a society that values things like harmony and balance, the umbrella is almost like a talisman. You know what I mean? It's protecting you from the weather, sure, but also from bad luck and negative energy.
I like that, a talisman.
Mhm.
So tell me more about this wedding ritual. What kind of umbrella are we even talking about?
Well, in many Chinese wedding traditions, it's a red umbrella. And red, of course, has a really deep meaning in Chinese culture, right? Good fortune, joy, protection, all of that. So you can picture it. The bride in her red wedding dress, and then this bright red umbrella shielding her as she walks to the ceremony. It's visually powerful, It really reinforces those beliefs.
Wow, I can see it. So what happened at this wedding?
Well, the source describes how the matron of honor, who's supposed to be holding that red umbrella over the bride, she was delayed in opening it.
Wait, delayed? That's where things get interesting.
Yeah, and sadly, the very next day, the bride got really sick, and she passed away soon after. Now, whether you believe in superstitions or not, the point is, this story really shows how deeply rooted those beliefs are in the culture. It's like even a small break from tradition can have huge consequences. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. And you can feel the author grappling with it,
Mhm.
like trying to make sense of it all. It makes you think about how we all try to find meaning, especially when something tragic happens.
Yeah, we do, don't we? We're always looking for explanations.
So this whole idea of the umbrella and a ritual like that, it really highlights how these everyday things are tied to these bigger beliefs. Like the umbrella itself has some kind of power.
Exactly. And it goes beyond weddings, too.
Hmm.
There's another layer to this whole belief system, and it's connected to the language itself. The Chinese word for umbrella, san, sounds almost exactly like the word for dissolution.
Ah, now that makes sense. That's why you don't give umbrellas as gifts, right?
Exactly. Think about it, giving someone a gift that basically sounds like the end of a relationship. It's like inviting bad luck and separation. It's a powerful superstition.
Wow, it's like the word itself carries bad luck. Language is fascinating.
It really is. It's so intertwined with culture, shaping each other in these really interesting ways.
So we've got this everyday object, right? It's supposed to protect against bad spirits, but it's also connected to this idea of separation. It makes you wonder, how do people actually deal with this in their lives? Does everyone just walk around afraid of umbrellas?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because the author actually talks about wanting to change how they see the umbrella. Instead of focusing on all the negative stuff, they want to use it for something good.
Okay, now we're talking. Tell me more about this. What do they have in mind?
Well, they talk about using the umbrella to help others, especially older people, like
Yeah.
using it to shade them from the sun while they wait for the bus, or offering it for support if they need help with steps.
I love that. Such a simple thing, but it says so much. Taking something with all this cultural baggage and turning it into something kind.
I know, right? And think about that taboo against giving umbrellas as gifts.
Hmm.
They're not just avoiding the object, they're embracing it, but in a way that challenges that negativity.
It's like they're saying, I'm not going to let superstition control me.
Yeah.
I'm going to use this to make a difference.
Exactly. It's about taking control,
Right.
reshaping the narrative. It makes you wonder, what other everyday things could we transform like this?
That is a great question. Well, it makes me think about, like, my grandma's old recipe book. It's falling apart, honestly. But to me, it's so much more than just recipes. It's a connection to her, to my family, to my childhood. It's like a tangible link to the past.
That's beautiful. And that's exactly it, right? It's about those personal connections that give these everyday objects real meaning, even if other people don't see it.
Absolutely. And this whole deep dive into umbrellas and superstitions, it's really opened my eyes to how we can transform our relationship with culture. It's not set in stone.
Yeah, it's constantly changing, evolving, shaped by people's interpretations and actions.
Speaking of interpretations, I keep thinking about that language connection. The word for umbrella sounding like dissolution. It really shows how language can influence those beliefs.
It's incredible, isn't it? Words have so much power. And it's not just in Chinese culture either. You see it everywhere.
I've heard that in some cultures, giving a clock as a gift is bad luck. It's like symbolizing time running out.
There you go. Perfect example. Even something like a clock can have all this symbolic meaning, and it affects what we do.
So what's the takeaway here? What does this all tell us about culture, language, and these everyday things?
I think it shows how they all work together, shaping how we see the world. It's like a reminder to look deeper beyond the surface. There's always a story behind it all.
And it shows how culture isn't just one thing. There's always room for interpretation, adaptation, even change.
Exactly. We're not just following traditions blindly. We can question them, reframe them, even reshape them. It's empowering.
It really is. So another big takeaway, even the most ordinary object can have extraordinary meaning. And that meaning can be both personal and cultural, changing how we interact with everything around us.
Absolutely. It makes you think, what objects have that kind of meaning for you? What stories did they tell?
Great questions. It's like we've been given a new way of seeing things, revealing all those hidden meanings in everyday life.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And as we finish up this part of our exploration of umbrellas and superstitions, I hope it encourages everyone to keep looking for those hidden meanings, those unexpected connections. You never know what you'll find.
So well said. And before we go, one last thought-provoking question. Okay, so I've got this idea of taking the umbrella, with all its baggage and turning it into something good. But what does that actually look like?
Well, the source gives some examples, like using the umbrella to shield older people from the sun if they're waiting for the bus, or offering it as support, like if someone's having trouble with steps.
Oh, I love that. It's so simple, but it's such a powerful statement. Like, they're taking this object that's supposed to ward off bad stuff and turning it into an act of caring.
Exactly. Especially when you think about that taboo against giving umbrellas as gifts. They're not avoiding it, they're actually embracing it, but
Right.
they're doing it in a way that changes the whole meaning.
It's like they're saying, hey, I'm not going to let this superstition run my life. I'm going to use this for good.
Right. It's about taking control, and it makes me think, what other things could we do that with? Like, what other everyday objects could we transform?
That's a great question. It makes me think about my grandma's old recipe book, just like falling apart. But to me, it's so much more than just recipes. It's like a connection to her, to my family, to my childhood. It's like, holding a piece of the past.
That's beautiful. And that's exactly it, right? It's those personal connections that give meaning to these everyday objects, even if other people don't get it.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it's really made me see that we can change how we relate to culture. It's not just like set in stone.
Right. Culture's alive, it changes, it evolves. It's all about how people interpret it, how they act.
And speaking of interpretations, I keep coming back to that language connection. The way umbrella sounds like dissolution. It really shows how much language can affect our beliefs.
It really is fascinating. Words have so much power, and it's not just Chinese culture either.
I've heard that in some cultures, it's bad luck to give a clock as a gift
Yeah.
because it symbolizes time running out.
Exactly. Perfect example. Even something as simple as a clock can have all this symbolic meaning, and it affects what we do, how we act.
So what have we learned here? What does this tell us about culture, language, and everyday objects?
I think it shows us how they all connect, how they influence how we see the world. It's like a reminder to look deeper, to think about the story behind things.
Yeah. And it shows that culture isn't just one thing. There's always room for different interpretations, different ways of seeing things. There's even room for change.
Exactly. We don't just have to blindly follow traditions. We can question them, change them, even make our own meanings.
It really is empowering. So another big takeaway for me, even the most ordinary thing could have meaning. And that meaning can be personal, it can be cultural, and it can change how we interact with the world.
Absolutely. It makes you think, what are those objects for you? What stories do they hold? What do they mean to you?
Such good questions.
Yeah.
It's like we've been given a new way of seeing things, a way to find all those hidden meanings in everyday life.
Couldn't have said it better. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into umbrellas and superstitions, I hope you'll all keep exploring those hidden meanings, those unexpected connections. Who knows what you'll find?
So well said. And before we move on, one final thought-provoking question. Think about it. What seemingly ordinary things in your life have taken on a deeper meaning? Maybe it's a beat-up baseball glove from when you were a kid, or a chipped teacup that's been passed down in your family, or even just your house key. Yeah, that feeling of home.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about this, right? It's not just the object, it's those stories, those emotions that we attach to it. Those are what give it meaning, history, that personal
It's
significance.
like we're surrounded by these stories, each object holding a piece of us, our past, who we are. And it took looking at another culture, like we did today with these Chinese umbrella superstitions, to really make me appreciate that.
Right. The world is full of these connections, culture, language, everyday things. It all ties together. And once you see it, it's like you see the world differently.
It's like having a secret decoder ring or something.
Exactly. And isn't that the whole point of exploring? We start with something like an umbrella and we end up discovering all this stuff, beliefs, interpretations, even how we can change things. It makes you want to be more open, to look deeper.
So well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you'll all join me in that. Think about the objects that mean something to you, the ones that tell your stories, your loved ones' stories, your story.
Yeah. And remember, there's always more to learn, more to discover, even in the most ordinary things.
Until next time, everyone, keep those umbrellas handy. Not just for the rain, but as a reminder of how everything connects. Culture, language, everyday objects, it all matters. And keep exploring. You never know what you'll find.